Yeah, no one's walking over here, so let's just do this shit. And I'm loud. I don't think I need a microphone. That doesn't do. Does it do anything for you? It's just me, but louder. All right. I wanted to use as long of a fucking title as I possibly could. So it's Tales, Trials, and Tips from a one-man aquarium. But then again, we've all been staring at the screen for 30 minutes, so what the fuck am I doing? So I have a maintenance company called Captive Aquatic Ecosystems, but we will get to that. Who the fuck am I? I don't even know. I've been in the industry since the mid-90s. For a good 10 years, I worked in 5 different stores. I'm originally from north of Dallas, but then I moved to Houston. But 5 different stores, pretty much staying at each store for like 2 years. I guess it's typical if anyone else is in the industry like that, because it's like I'd start at a place for 2 years and think like, oh, that's a cool place. After 2 years, I fucking hated the place and the owners. And I was like, what's the other cool place? And I'd go here. And then maybe I'd like go out a little further, like a longer commute. And it's just, then I got to Houston and did that too. And I think at the end of that, my dad's self-employed. At the end of that, my dad was like, work for yourself. Because I just had this rash of like, oh, Dad, I'm going to go work at this new place. It's pretty badass. 2 years later, these fuckers don't even know what they're doing. I don't know. Has anyone in here ever worked at a fish store or owns a fish store? Like, God, this is going to sound so cynical. But, and I only know what I've experienced. I don't know what everyone, but to me, it's like the fish store owner. Like if you're just a customer and you think like, oh, this guy knows so much or this lady knows so much. And sometimes it's fucking disappointing because running a store, let me tell you, because I spent a lot of time in them, can be a drag. And I don't mean to be so negative, but it can be a drag if you're trying to make money. And this is discretionary income, and our industry just rides on top of whether people have money to spend or not. And so running it can be tough. But I think sometimes some of the store owners that I worked for, like after, so many years and they're just burnt out, and they'll sit there and tell you some information that's like 15 years old. But I was the like younger dude, like just hoovering up information. And that's sort of what would eventually make me feel like I'm going to go to the next store because y'all don't even care to this level. I moved from Dallas to Houston, and I was in Houston for a little bit, working at a store, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was a zookeeper for a couple years because one of the zookeepers used to come in, and he used to clean tanks on the side. And he would always come in, and he knew I was disgruntled at that store, and he was like, come work for the zoo because they just lost their dude that did the reef tank. And so I was like, okay. And that was my little stint in public aquarium, and that was a mixed bag too. Y'all are going to think I'm such a negative asshole, but it's just like, I don't know, I'm like a creative person and I have to be doing something and stuff like that. That's why what I do now is great. Between Reef Beef, but also just installing and doing maintenance. I can pick up a new client and rehab something and that's my creative thing I have to do. But it was cool because what they put me in charge of right off the bat was a 4,000 gallon reef zones exhibit. And before then, that's obviously like the biggest thing I had ever screwed with. And it was super fun. Let me ask you this: who's been doing this for a long time? Like over let's do this over 10 years, or 10 years, within 10 years, 20 years, over 20 years, 30 years. Okay, so we're about the same. But so in the very early 2000s, has anyone heard of Eco Aqualizer? Besides when the fuck I said it? Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So there was this bullshit product that, so I worked at the zoo, and y'all have heard that story, so I'm not going to repeat it. But the Eco Aqualizer guy, when I got bored of the zoo, he pulled me off of there. Now it was and this is the very early 2000s. It was a tube that you pass it through, and it had like magnets and far infrared powder. Absolute bullshit. But I worked for him, and it's funny, like when Rich and I were gonna do, I didn't know what Reef Beef was gonna do or become or anything, but I was concerned, like, if this did turn into something, I don't want anyone going like, hey, that's that Eco Aqualizer motherfucker. Now it wasn't my company, it wasn't me, but I worked for them. But so that's why in one of the earliest Reef Beef episodes, I sort of spoke out about, we had the whole episode about eco-aqualizer because I was like, look, this is bullshit, and I'm my atonement for it. And then after I left eco-aqualizer in the zoo, I started my maintenance company in 2004, and I've been self-employed ever since. And Reef Beef. Reef Beef just gets a tiny little mention. And that's when I had long hair and my daughter's sunglasses, because that's what you do. There's a little picture someone came up on AI for Reef Beef. I thought that looked cool. And then someone else made this, even though they overstated the beard a little bit. And here's what's fucked up. You see something weird? Yeah. Oh, very perceptive. I did not do this on purpose, but I'm wearing the same fucking shirt. I didn't, I swear to God, says the atheist. But if you've never heard of Reef Beef, it's Reef Beef Podcast, and go like it and give it kisses. Oh, also, Richard does not look that young. He looks like a... And where the fuck are my bottom eyelids? But that's AI. So this whole presentation is going to be like a big collage of ADD mess, okay? But that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to go through like some tanks that I do, and then we'll get to other stuff. But this was in a hospital. This is a 700 gallon. I say was because I don't have that tank anymore, because that hospital is major penny pinchers, and they thought it was expensive. So that's dumb to have me put that in there, and then a couple years later say, so I don't go look at it because it's far away from me, but this was an insert. I'm not in love with inserts because I think it's just much more cooler to actually make a reef tank. But when you do this for a living, like you're taking on fresh water and you're taking on, I've already said anything that's of any interest, so whatever y'all are walking into now is just like, yeah. Anyway, so it was an insert that was from Poseidon Construction. That, you know, that shit gets pretty crazy. If I remember, that was like $16,000, just the insert. The whole tank I did for $80,000. But it was cool. We put it in there when it was all scaffolding and we had to wear hard hats and all that kind of stuff. But it was cool. It was successful while I did it. Oh, funny enough, I've been doing this for a long time, even before I put this in, but like, I love powder blue tangs, but you don't put powder blue tangs in a tank because they're evil assholes. But it's so crazy. You'll say that to a room, and one guy's like, "I have a nice one." It's like, okay, you're the exception. But I had one powder blue tank in here and he was the biggest asshole, and it drove me nuts because I was like, "Bro, you have a 700-gallon aquarium." Yeah, and I'm the asshole because he came out of the ocean. He's like, 700 gallons. I don't know how well that shows up. This is another tank that I do, but it was interesting. You know, when you do this for a living, there's all sorts of ways you come upon clients. Sometimes people already have some shit and they want you to rehab it. My favorite one, of course, is when someone wants a tank and they don't have shit and you get to do it all, you know, how you do. But let's be honest, like the main portion of my business is someone just being frustrated with their crap or what someone else is doing, and then they bring you in. And then I had to change all sorts of stuff. I don't normally do this, but this was interesting. The guy did the 80-20, the extruded aluminum. But this one was extremely well built. And so what he wanted to do was, you know, not flesh it out with cabinetry, you know, which I think is cool. It's nice to work on. It's very like functional instead of like aesthetic. But he had some rinky-dink sumps and shit like that. I didn't like it, so we pulled all that out. And man, it was crazy, but I did the measuring, and then I got Planet to do, it's just a glass aquarium, and I think it's like 150 gallons or 80 gallons, 180 gallons, something like that. It's the entire bottom, because I slid it in through the side, the entire bottom is just a glass sump. And we haven't done it yet. Like I was going to do the whole goofy thing, like put the color changing lights on there. But when you do that, when you expose it like that, I was trying to have everything at least look nice. I got a carbon reactor there. I got a algal turf scrubber right there. A Vertex skimmer, which the client got on the cheap. It just scares me because Vertex doesn't exist anymore, you know. So if the pump dies, we'll have to figure out, you know. And there's a Red Sea. I've had a tough time with fleece rollers. trying to use different ones, and they all shit the bed and pissed me off. And then that Polish one that went out of business, Reef Factory. Well, you get all the stuff and you start moving towards a certain ecosystem and like, oh, we're out of business. So fleece roller, and then there's a caulk reactor. But it's sort of cool to have it all exposed. It is easier for me to work on, you know. This is a freshwater tank, and this was Aqua Decor. I think they're in Serbia, Croatia, something like that. And there's places in the United States that do this fake stuff very well. But man, Aqua Decor just is when you're talking about freshwater, they just do, it's just an extra nice. But it's crazy, it's like white styrofoam inside, and then I think it's polyurethane that they put over and etch and airbrush. But it's really cool, and it's funny, I cleaned this tank, sorry, because this is before I fully set it up, but it shows you those formations better. But it's cool, this one's about a 400-gallon aquarium, and you can look like down it, and all this runs right down the middle. And there's an overflow here, which this completely like encases in. But it makes it super cool looking. So what I had to do is I had to silicone them down there.
Do they float if you don't?
Yeah, they totally would. Here's a tank that's in the wall. I don't know how easily, it'd be cool if the screen was bigger, but I don't know how easy that is to see. It's funny, this guy owns like 12 Sonic hamburger places, and when I first, this one I got to put in from the get-go, but he was like, this house is made by burgers, is what he told me. I was like, all right, dude, just calm down. Just pay your bill. Yeah. Oh yeah, I did that twice. So this doesn't look like much, but this is another tank that I did, and this is what I'm showing, that I like to make structures, but I'm not cheap when I do it because it takes me a lot of time. This took me, it doesn't look like much. I think this is like a 120, but it's very vertical. But it took me 2 days. But you have to talk about this stuff with the client beforehand. You have to say, ask them what's their budget and what would they allow you to do for so much money. But so I use Marco Rock's E400, the hydraulic cement, to put these all together. And this is the stuff I love. This is when you can be creative because, it's largely up to me. I'm the expert when I come into this situation. So it's like, and I purposefully avoid what I call a pseudo hobbyist, which is like the hobbyist that wants to screw with it, because more or less my policy is like, you've seen my portfolio, you've seen what I do. When you hire me, it's sort of like you go do what you do. And I don't want too many Indians, not enough chiefs. I don't want someone thinking they can add this or fish or chemicals or any of that. It's insane. Just let me do your tank because I know how to do it. And so I sort of scare those people off. But so when I get to do something like this, I just decided, hey, I'm gonna make an arch right there. And so it looks stupid like that, but when you go down, I don't know if can you see how that's that? Yeah. Now? And it's, as we all know too, we sharing like pictures of each other's aquariums is so much different than if you're standing in front of it. It's like hard to capture that in a photo. But it's cool. This is like an aftercare facility. And again, I walked around with the CEO because he didn't know where the fuck to put an aquarium. And so we walked all over the building. I was like, put one right there. And I was excited about it because there's like a cafeteria right here. It's not like I was going to sell anything to old people like sitting around, but I thought it was a congregating area. That's part of what this goes to, is to show you when you do this for a living, you have to think about so much more than just aquariums. You have to know how to deal with people and where you should put stuff. But I just figured there's like an elevator right here and people are going to congregate right here. So that was a great way to... Plus, it's funny, what ends up happening is all the old people, because there was a time where this place was like, oh, we don't know if we need to get rid of the aquarium because everything's so expensive. And then they have this thing where the residents there get together and vote on stuff. And they were like, if you take this aquarium out, we're all going to go to a different facility. I was like, thank you, old people. This was tricky to do, even though I knew it was going to be like that heading in, because I used super glue to attach things to the box, and I didn't know exactly how corals would do, inside this arch. But really, it's not such a big tank that it's ended up bad. Like corals sort of lean out, or purposefully put soft corals and whatnot in there and they do it good. This is a really tall tank. I think this one was 4 foot tall. And these were, that's an insert as well, obviously. No, I dropped a boulder in there. But that's from Universal Rocks in Dallas. And it's this whole, like, look, these are, they're young, obviously, but these are little frontosa. And so that shows you how tall this thing is. I like to do that sometimes. I'll show you another example, but I have a couple tanks that are like a little obscenely tall. But I'm tall, so it works. Here's a little peninsula tank, and that picture's not that great, but here's a video, and if I put, yeah, okay, we'll do this. So this is, I like peninsula tanks too, and they can be tricky with water flow. This tank turns out great, but you know, and there's so many different things you could do. I could plumb over to the inside of this cabinet and you know, dump the return over there, but that's not how it is. It's in the, it's one of those like ghost overflows where the return's drilled through the glass. But you know, and then I have 2 MP40s at the end, and the trick becomes that to really get it churning way down here, you got to get it a little crazy in the front end, so you get all this gravel moving around. This is what I consider one of my best tanks. I put this in from the get-go. The dude owns an oil company, and this tank is now 14 years old. I've cleaned this tank once a week for the last 14 years, and you pretty much have to own an oil company to pay me that much for, because this dude has paid me a lot of money. But, I mean, I could go into a diatribe about that, but having owned a maintenance company for so long, I really say, like, it's a tough journey, but you have to keep trying to get towards the high-end clientele, and you have to value your own time. You have to get good at it so you can charge a lot of money, because early in my career, there's so many times where you're at someone's house and working on this rinky-dink aquarium, and it's like, why am I doing this? And so I charge to where I'm not sitting there going, I know why the fuck I'm doing this, because someone's paying me a lot of money, you know. But this is, you know, and this is come and go, and as a matter of fact, this photo's like 2 years old. But you see how, but these are green Bali slimers. You see how big, that's actually like this big. And there's a chalice right here. Those are 2 Euphilia, you know, and they're about like that big. Like, and that's, and man, not to sound elitist, but like, it sort of bugs me, like the popularity of, you see all these tanks and it has like 50,000 frags in it. And to me, that doesn't do anything for me. Now, I realize a tank has to start somewhere, and that's not fair, because then I'm like, here's a 14-year-old tank. And it is hard to leave a tank somewhere for 14 years and not move. But this tank is 4 foot tall, and this is a reef tank. I think I have a video of it. Here, if I do that. Okay, yeah, there. This tank, as a reef tank being 4 foot tall, unnerved me a little bit, because even though I have long arms, I had to think a lot about what I put down here, because, man, you know, and they have Eheim tongs, and they have the grabbers that work for a while and then break. But it's like, you can't do anything delicate. And now you're going to say I'm crazy because I have pulsing xenia right there. And with me, pulsing xenia is a love-hate relationship. Now, you also have to understand, like, y'all are hobbyists, and so you have to understand from the maintenance standpoint, I'm putting these in-house, and it's all about like the aesthetics of what I made. It's not that I have an Oregon blue torrid or strawberry shortcake. These people don't even know what the fuck that is. And it's more about creating, you know, textures and colors and movements and all this and that. And it's just like when I worked at the zoo. It's funny, when I worked at the zoo, I sort of hated it because I thought all our exhibits were dog shit. And I would tell the senior that, and he's like, but then go out. And I would go out and walk around the public, and they're like, oh, look at this, oh, look at that. I was just sort of being a negative Nancy because I wanted them to be this. I wanted it to be to where like hobbyists would think it was badass. But sort like that's not really what zoos do, you know. And I was like, ugh. And so, you know, that's still pretty. I don't really care who you are, it's still pretty. But the funny thing, so though, with the xenia here, it's hard to get off of here, but this is like a triangular rock that recesses back behind it. So I knew, in it, I'm happy to say that it did work out. I wanted to put xenia down there because nothing else was doing much right there, and I wanted to cover that bare rock. Well, what's happened is the xenia refused to grow back into that shade, so they just sort of fade and stop. Now, anytime, as xenia do, you know, when they get loose and then want to float around, I'm like, hell no. You know, and I grab them and chunk them in the trash. I like Xenia, but just like green star pulps, like the shit can go crazy, and then I have it right here. Like I have a what's that soft coral? It's like Kenya tree, but it's a greenish one, and yeah. And then the star pulps keep wanting to cover it up. So now I've created myself a chore where I have to go peel it off. But I mean, that's part of the job. I don't like to make it to where it's too much work. And then the frickin', rose bubble tip anemones divide like their fancy heptasia. That's annoying as well. But all together, like to give you the scale of this coral is about that big.
Is that refis on that?
Yes, this is the first tank I put refis on, and this is not a fucking refi commercial, but I'm going to proselytize for a second. I love refi. It's a refi Unos. It's a product right now that isn't like in a golden area because they haven't been bought out by some big corporate company. And Daniel, you can call him on the phone. And the other thing too is it has like a little digital readout, and you can do the IP address. And I know some people complain, like if you have like a light or a product that is controlled on the cloud. So what if Daniel goes out of business? Then his product is like bricked. If that whole IP thing quits running, to run his lights. But
It runs it locally, so actually, yeah.
It does?
You don't even need
That it's not a problem?
There's no cloud aspect.
Okay. All right. I was looking for an excuse to hate Daniel, but I just can't find one. Yeah. No, so does anyone here know the name Andrew Bauma? So Andrew's a great guy, and it's funny, he approached me at MACNA, Minneapolis, the last MACNA. And it's like people are always telling me, Ben, you should try this, Ben, you should try that. So I guarded a little bit. And he was like, try these refi lights. And I was like, another fucking light, whatever. And before this, I was like Team Radeon. But, and I'm not trying to dog Radeon. I'm just trying to dog Ecotech. I love their pumps. But like a Radeon, it does not fucking compete with a refi. And as a matter of fact, a Radeon has a 1-year warranty and a refi has a 3-year warranty. And Ecotech being bought out by corporate masters, and maybe I'm wrong on this that I haven't tried, but I can't really call them and like talk to someone I know and get some sort of personal. It's like, oh, did you fill out a ticket? I just want to talk. I'm a maintenance company. I'm here at the clients now. I got to figure this shit out right here. I'm not filling out tickets. I need some help right now or I'm going to move to a different product. Anyways, I like refis. That's all that means. And I will say one thing. I was surprised because Andrew and Daniel were promising me they were powerful enough for a 4-foot tank. And so you'll see a Tridacna, what do I have? I have a Hippopus and a Tridacna dorasa right there. And then I borrowed someone's par meter and I was getting 110 at 4 feet down at the bottom of here. And I'll tell you, I've been keeping Tridacna since the 90s. Yes, Tridacnas like a lot of light, but a Hippopus and a dorasa, they can adapt to some lower shit. Would you do this with a Maxima or Crocea? Hell no. But it's just too far down. I could if I glued it, way up here. But, and this was, I've been running these lights now, I think 3 years. I have 40 refis out in the field, and I'm still running. I've had a couple returns, and I send it to Daniel, he fixed it, but I'm running every original refi I've ever bought. And that's why I would never move back to Radeon, because that was not the case with Radeons. I like the light that Radeons put out. I just didn't like how they would shit the bed early, and then I had no one to talk to. How do I maintain reef tanks? I do big, frequent water changes. I'm a dinosaur to a certain degree in the industry, so I do old school things that seem to be going out of popularity, but it's how I get those results. I do big, frequent water changes. I like carbon, but I maybe approach it differently. I do what would be considered a really small amount, but I change these little bags every time I'm there. So it's like small amounts changed frequently, because I don't want to run so much that I'm possibly stripping out other stuff. It may just be a happy medium. And really, mostly what I'm going for is discoloration of the water. And I've been doing that now. I've been concentrating on that now for like maybe 8 years, and it works, and that's how I do it. Polyfilter, who knows? I've been in this industry a long time, And polyfilter is so fucking old. It has been around way longer than I've been in. I mean, I think they came up with it in the 80s. Does everyone know what polyfilter is? Now, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I've always wondered. It seems like it's like maybe the same stuff that DI resin, cation and anion resin is made out of, like sprayed on this, but it's some sort of like ion exchange resin on this pad. And it's sort of like, I wouldn't say it's a secret of mine, but I put them in every single tank that I do. And then I could like not do it for a while. When I first started using them, I would omit them for a while, for months, and then go back to using them. Because, you know, so I hang with a bunch of people in the industry, like Richard, that are like very demanding of fucking data. And I love that. I love that. But I don't always have the time. I'm cleaning tanks. I'm not running an experiment. So a lot of my stuff will end up being anecdotal compared to but in Sanjay, Joshi, and he's like, yeah, but what's I don't fucking know. I know I take them out and the tank gets a little fucked up. I put them back in and it's better.
Yeah, how often do you change those?
So I'm real particular. On the carbon, I change every time I'm there, okay. Then polyfilter. Now, you know what? Let me get back to that because there's a slide where I go into that. That would make sense. I'm real big on heavy skimming, and I think it's sort of misconstrued. Some people act like I invented wet skimming because I started doing it a long freaking time ago, but I think I popularized it, but I don't think I invented it. And I'll get into that as well. I'm a big user of Tropic Marin AFR, if anyone wants to go back and forth about that, because there was a while that, I think it was Dong. Dong was on a live thing that I did with Dong. He was misinformed about this thing. He thought when it gets hot that it can create some, like, I don't remember what he said, some bad byproducts. But it's like it would never get that hot. But does anyone here use AFR? Oh, you did that so slowly.
I use it on my small tanks. But,
Yeah.
It works well.
I guess it gets crazy, and again, I have a slide for that as well. But it gets crazy because if you're just buying their already made stuff, like it gets expensive. Now I use it on, that's all I use. I use it on those giant tanks that you saw. But the thing is I only get the dry 1,600 gram thing and reconstitute. That's the only way to like.
Yeah, and I use a magnetic stirrer to stir it up.
Yeah, it's not very soluble. It's I'll get to that. I do something that's unorthodox and is going to make some of you clutch your pearls, but I barely test shit. You see this shit. I've been cleaning this tank for 4 years. I have never once tested phosphate or nitrate. Now, I'm not up here proselytizing, trying to make y'all feel bad if you do or say that you shouldn't. Certainly fucking not, because a lot of us, we like to do that type of stuff. But my objective, and you see my tanks, a lot of it, it's not completely like SPS dominated, because from a maintenance standpoint, that's pretty tricky to do. Like I'm either at your house once a week or every other week, and that's just not going to cut it with a completely SPS dominated tank. So yeah, it's more forgiving. There's a lot of softies and stuff like that. But my goal is I get someone's tank going, and I try to get the corals as big as possible, as quick as possible. I can usually do that from nothing to pretty full in about a year. I can usually get that off. And that's when I'm doing more work, because in that whole period, you're in the time of the uglies. Because until the corals are big, there's just a lot of nutrients and area for algae to grow. So I'm like, come on, corals. Because they'll, there's a couple tanks where I was like, I'm just curious. And I checked the nitrates and they were like 0. And I do big water changes, but these corals get so big and are sucking all this stuff down. Like I get to where, when I get to here, I don't give a shit what the nutrients are. And if something gets a little dirty, I ask them how much they're feeding. I back that down and I'll do a bigger water change. Because whatever you're putting into the tank, these corals are absorbing into them. But before you get to that point, you can get into some ugly messes.
Do you have the same kind of process with like any of your smaller tanks or anything like that?
Of what?
Just like not testing or anything like that.
I guess that was on the bottom of the thing. I habitually, obsessively test two things: salinity and alkalinity. Because however the fuck I'm doing stuff, and it's not a secret, it's simple, but if I'm just obsessive about salinity and alkalinity, and I've been doing this so long, I just sort of know how to navigate through anything else. I don't give a fuck what the cobalt is. I don't care what you know what I'm saying? I totally understand how a hobbyist gets into that minutia, but Even though I get paid well for what I do, people are not paying for that level of minutia. You want me to run the moonshiners on your system, like I'll be able to pay my house off in a couple months. Okay, here's a little thing, trash can on wheels. This is logistically, every client ends up getting done differently because it depends. Is it a business? Is it a house? Is it this or that? This is my biggest way that I do stuff, which again is pretty simple. It's a 44-gallon trash can with wheels, and I put that there because, man, if you don't periodically put some sort of lubricant on that wheels, not only does it get stuck, but like I'm going into a commercial spot and it's like, people are always like, I sort of like it because it gets people out of my way because like, the fuck is that? So you got to, and then, man, so many years again, I've gone through so many iterations of if you do this for a living, everyone has some sort of transfer pump that you're moving water here and there with. And I feel like, it's not like I have the only answers to this, but I feel like I've evolved through so many freaking years of what's the perfect like pump that I would use to move water around for me. And so everyone knows what this is. It's a Supreme mag drive. It's a mag 18. And it's like, again, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with mag drives because it's just old school. And used to back in the days, you take over a tank and someone has it as a main pump. And it's almost like a heater. If you have a mag drive, you don't need a heater. But the reason I love it for what I do is it's like a damn brick. It's heavy as hell. So when I need this pump where I'm like do a water change and I got to pump it into their toilet or I got to move water here, I need that pump to like hold itself in place. And a lot of the other, like I tried a Seche once, ADV or whatever, and it's just light. It wouldn't do, if I move the hose, it moves. And I always put an elbow on it because, I want to get as much as I possibly can. And you just put a barb fitting. That's 3/4 right there, barb fitting. So a little possibly unorthodox thing is I fucking hate vinyl hose. I love silicone hose. But there's a lot of caveats with it too. Like there's things that silicone hoses do, like kink real bad. And if you're talking about negative pressure, you wouldn't want to make a drain go through because it creates negative pressure and it'll collapse. But I have found for my thumbs, it's important on this transfer pump for my thumb to be able to close on a hose. If I'm putting water in, and the silicone also allows me to pinch with my left hand and then close up here. If I do 1 inch, my thumb goes in it. 1/2 inch is just too small. So I love 3/4 inch. What did I put here? It's a mag drive. It's this particular one that I just get off of Amazon. It's feelers, 3/4 inch, elbow, blah, blah, blah. That's like what I say is like after 30, oh shit, what did I do? After 30 years, wait, how do I maximize that back out? No one knows. Let's see, play. Yes, you're right. I guess I should speed up too because I am moving slow. Okay. Here's a little tip, and some of this shit may seem banal, like, yeah, of course, Ben, but sometimes I don't know who knows what, and this is just the stuff that I do when I clean a tank. There'll be scenarios where I might be trying to move hair algae or xenia clumps or anthelia or something like that. I'm trying to get it out. Well, unless you want to run through one of these pumps way too many times or replace the impeller, you sort of have to protect it. Because, man, if I just strip in hair algae, put it in here, and then I'm trying to get that pump to, like, blow hair algae into their toilet, I'll have to keep taking apart the pump, and I'll screw it up. So I just use these mesh bags. This is just an Eheim mesh bag that I'll run the water through but collect the bullshit if I'm trying to do that, and then take that out. And you use these clips, which unfortunately you have to buy all the time. I really wish, this might be crazy, but I wish they would make these with titanium coil so I could just buy one. And I would pay $100 for it, but it's like I've probably spent $100 on these over the years. So salinity, this is my favorite way to check salinity. Does anyone know Boomer, this old dude Boomer? He's like a chemist. He ran like the chemistry part of Reef to Reef or Reef Central for a long time. After what's that guy that wrote all those badass articles on chemistry? Randy Holmes Farley. When Randy Holmes Farley stepped down, Boomer came on. But Boomer had told Richard and I about this a long time ago. And but it's VG STX3, and the only place I really know how to get it is off of Amazon. But for a while I hated refractometers, but this thing brought me back to refractometers. It's much more robust. They cost like $115, $120, but it has, like, I don't want to get too much into the weeds about it, but I think like a refractometer, to do the automatic temperature compensation, they have like a copper tube or something inside of them. And this one uses like a thicker one, so it makes it a little more stable. But I always use parts per thousand, not specific gravity, even though both scales are on there. The thing that Boomer told me about it is it, more so than other cheaper refractometers or whatever, is like very specifically made by VG to it's like calibrated for synthetic seawater. I usually go to 35 parts per thousand. Richard loves 34 because it gives him a little buffer zone, but I don't know, we pick a number and we stick to it, right, obsessively for no reason. I calibrate it a lot, and that's why I tell people about refractometers or whatever. So if you have a piece of equipment that can be calibrated, I would say don't be lazy on that calibration, because there's too often that you'll check something and it's like, oh shit, it's this, and you'll go make a change. And if you were to calibrate it, and all you do is drop a fucking drop of water on there, there's no excuse to, because if I had $1 for every time someone like never calibrated their refractometer and then make changes and then find out that those changes were wrong, like, be careful of that. It's funny too, because I'm all ADD if you can't tell, but so I keep it in a bright orange case so I don't forget it and drop it, but I still forget it and drop it, and that's why it's in there. And I have 2 of them because I forget it and I drop it all the time. I left it at some lady's house and she called me and it was like an hour away, and so I was like, I'm just ordering another one just because I know I'll leave one somewhere. But an important part, this wouldn't come up with a hobbyist, but doing maintenance, like where I'm in a car, out of a car, in someone's house, blah, 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 when it's really hot or cold, like I don't trust it if the refractometer itself is hot or cold. I'll bring it in and set it in their house for like 15 minutes. Because I've noticed, even though it's doing automatic temperature compensation, if the body of it is not like room temperature, the results are off. Again, a hobbyist wouldn't be dragging it outside. Here's what I do the carbon with. They're only like, it's like a 3-inch by 8-inch little bag. It's from Tideline. It has a zipper on it. But so it's Kolar Labs carbon is the one I like. It's also good because I get the big bucket, and then the bucket is what I used to have to buy buckets, but now I just buy the Kolar Labs because now I already have a bucket, and they have a decent lid on it too. These are the Tideline bags. I change them every visit. I put it, it's not, of course, there's a whole thing about putting carbon in your tank passively, yes, of course, I know all that. Like, if you just throw it in a corner of your sump, it's not all that effective. So I put them in baffles and whatnot. There's a couple tanks I have where I have it in a reactor, which is a much more efficient way to run carbon. But what I'm trying to do is do a small amount of carbon, and I don't want to, when I'm at someone's house, I can't take so much time doing one little thing. So it's like, grab this sausage of carbon, rinse a new one, throw it in this baffle, and then we're moving on to something else. Yeah, sometimes easier to remove. Oh, this is sort of silly, but like when I take these out and then I have a whole bucket that I bring home, and it's like when I'm trying to get the carbon out, I used to be like impatient and undo the zipper and try to like flip all the carbon out of it. And then I learned if you let it sit there and dry and open the zipper, it just all falls out. So it's funny, this is a tree in front of my house, and sometimes I'll have like 20 stacked in this crook of a tree. Because in the morning I'll put them there, and when I come home after the day, I can just open these and I throw them all over the yard. I put carbon all in the yard. It's not it helps the soil, it not get compacted. It's not doing anything for the soil besides. But I always think to myself, like 1,000 years from now, an archaeologist is gonna, like, what caught on fire here? It's like, holy crap. This is where the nuclear explosion was. Throw it in the yard, clarity water. Tropic Marin AFR. I administer it with Khmer doses, even though I sometimes get pissed at Khmer dosers. But I use the 1,600 gram. It's very important to use 0 TDS. I got a little lazy for a while, and my RO unit went off the page. And I noticed the AFR in my jug was sort of scaling out a bit. And then I paid more attention to my RO unit, got back down to 0 TDS, and it was staying better soluble. It is a bitch though, man. It's a powder that doesn't want to dissolve very well, and so it takes a couple days even when you're vigorously stirring it. I had this thing because I do it in those clear jugs. I had this thing where the Neptune P-Mup, because I was trying to find a pump that would fit in there, and I found that a P-Mup would go right down there. But you can't a P-Mup though. You can't put it through too much rigor because it's just a tiny little pump. And I'm not going to go into how AFR works, but it's like calcium formate, so it's bound up, and so it works on biological action to release that later when it's in the tank. So that's the only trick of it is when you use AFR, you can't like add AFR and like, cool, what's my alkalinity now? It's like you're always like behind it a little bit, steering it in the right direction, which works. It works well for me for maintenance because I'm going to be at your house like once a week or every other week, and that just gives it time. Like I'll make a minor adjustment. And since these are just soft corals mostly with some hard corals here and there, like they don't give too much of a crap, and I show up the next time, and it's easy to steer that for me. Here's my funny low-tech thing. I found out, I do the thing with the PMAP or whatever, all this stuff. Now I just have this jug. The 1,600 grams dissolves into 10 liters. So I maybe didn't need to do it this way, but I bought a 2,000 milliliter graduated cylinder, because it kept bugging me. I was wanting to be precise. And then I also came up with this other thing. I just put a doser on my freshwater vat, and I made it dose 10 liters, which took like a day. And it fried the doser. The doser was like, we don't do that. But so here's in my back seat of my truck. That's where I keep my salt. And this jug rides here. I just throw the AFR, and it sits there. And man, when I'm driving around Houston with its fucked up streets, like this jug is like, and I find if I do that for 3 days, that's how I mix my AFR, is it bobbling in the back of my truck. I love to check alkalinity. I don't put in, Chris is going to clutch his pearls, but I just want the whole number. Again, I'm doing maintenance. I just need a quick snapshot of what I'm doing. So I want to know 8, I want to know 9, I want to know 10. I don't give a shit if it's 8.3 or 8.8. Again, hobbyists have the luxury to zoom in on that scrutiny, but there's a saying that I say is like when you're doing this for a business, you got to let good enough be good enough, because I'm not there all the time. I just got to figure out what's good enough for this tank and make that be good enough. But I love this Tropic Marin test kit because there's a couple other companies that have it too, but just one drop is 1 DKH. And I can get the water and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it's like, okay, boom, and I'm doing something else. Polyfilter. You asked me, or did the ask me left? So he left, so fuck off. He doesn't know. No, so like I said, and it's funny, I'm a guy that demands like data and whatnot as well. So like I love Polyfilter, but if you get their package, you start reading off the back, you're like, well, I don't know about that. That seems bullshit. But I do know that they do help me, and I do know that they absorb organics, and I've had them absorb copper, heavy metals out of tanks, because they change color and let you know what they're absorbing. So what I do is, it looks like a mechanical filter. That's not how I treat them, and even though invariably they will act as a mechanical filter. But when I get to the clients, I'll take their Polyfilter, and I can look just by looking at it right off the bat. Do I need to clean this and assess it? Because sometimes it's so damn dirty, I'm just like, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like this, but they're wealthy people. Like, we're not bickering over a $10 Polyfilter. So I get it, and it's like really crappy, just straight in the trash. But depending on the state of the tank, a Polyfilter generally run like a month or so. But what I'll do too is if it's questionable, it has a lot of debris on it, I'll take it, I'll blast it with a hose, and then I can look on it. Like, can we go, this is like a moralistic thing, but I truly do for my client. Like, I don't put shit in their tank or talk them into shit they don't need because I'm trying to take more money home. Like, my thing is honesty, and I just run all these details that they're not even gonna know or ask me about. I just run it like if it's my own thing, and if I just be honest and don't lie and just do the honest shit, it's easier for me to conduct what I'm doing, because if I ever leave anything open-ended where someone could call me on it and you lose a client, like, you don't wanna operate like that. So I look, it's like I'm in a mansion, but I'm like looking at this Polyfilter like, we can run another couple of weeks. But if you be honest and run it honest, that's, what people are asking of you. And sometimes I'll smell it too, because when sometimes if it's, usually it'll be discolored and smells really bad, but you can tell when it is to change it. Wet skimming, and this one does like a little video. I'm going to sort of speed it up because I'm being long-winded. But does anyone here not clear about what wet skimming is? That's good. So fuck that slide. These help me a lot. The Coral View has this because when you are wet skimming, it's helpful to come like straight off of you don't really want to dip and come back up and then into your bucket. So Coral View has these things. Now this is for 3/8, but I know a few skimmers have 3/8. See, me being so big on wet skimming, I get so bothered about the size of the nipples, I love to say that word, on skimmer heads because a lot of them are like an afterthought. And when they're like a pinhole, that doesn't lend itself to, so you have to think about that. And I have done before where I've used, what's that drill bit that comes to a cone? Stepper? Stepper. I love those things. And they're pricey, but I love it because I make my own nipples. Because there's a lot of skimmers that just have this it just wants a little pinhole going through it. Here, in fact, I'm showing something I said not to do, which is you don't really want it to loop down and come up because it's trying to fight gravity, but there you see it there. We know this. This is obvious. I was just saying, back in the days, there used to be different technologies. Nowadays, it's almost all needle wheel impellers. Don't be lazy. You're going to have to clean this out a couple times a year. You could just, I can walk up and look at a skimmer and tell if it's being like anemic or not, sort of. But then I have to go through and clean all that out. But it's just a perfect place for all this crap to gather in there. This is a recent thing that just sort of struck me. I had this Seche, the impeller went out in a client's, but you know what salt water does to stuff over time? And then, I was going to get a replacement impeller, but I was like, I don't know what Seche that is. So I started taking white electrical tape and going on the cord, and I would write like Syncra 4.0. Because if I waited till the pump did that and I just didn't remember what the hell it was, and now I got to just chunk it or guess or, So I try to come up with solutions that could be like a quick thing. Just come up on the cord here, put a white electrical tape, and just say Syncra 4.0.
Easy to figure out what plug into.
Yeah. I mean, I could call Jason or, and ask, but it's like, okay, so here's a story, as if I hadn't been doing that the whole time. Lakeside fiasco, a tale of general liability insurance. So about 15 years ago, I took over, it was this wealthy guy, and he had sons my age, and I had a friend, and my friend was friends with his sons, and it was like an hour north of me, and he's like, oh, I go to this place and hang out with these dudes, and their dad has this giant aquarium in there. It was giant, but it's 550, that's pretty big. But he said, maybe you can come hang out with us and then try to weasel in and get the dad to get you to clean the tank. So, and there was a weird thing. We had a show about this where nickel glass, like float glass, where if you don't flip that nickel on the outside, it can get hazy on there. And that must be what happened to this tank because it just had this haze. And so when I went to the house, hung out, and I told, hey, Mr. Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, this is what I do for a living. Maybe you would let me clean the tank. And he's a real creature of habit, so it took him a while to let him. But I was like, see, that tank's all hazy. Like I could try to remove that. And if that doesn't work, maybe I can get you a new tank. Because it was horrible. And this isn't a mansion. It was just a hazy, horrible mess. But so the first thing I did was I looked online, and they have cerium oxide is like a glass polisher. And they have this drill buffer kit. And I drained this damn tank. It's a tank big enough I could sit down in it. And I'm doing this cerium oxide, and it didn't do anything. And then I had some CLR, who knows, did that. Even muriatic acid, but that was sketchy because I was in an enclosed space. So I was like, I'm not trying to die over this tank. But I dribbled straight muriatic acid on it and then wiped it. And I was like, okay, dude, we're just replacing the tank. So I ordered a new tank, but again, I guess I'm not trying to make excuses for myself, but this was 15 years ago, and it's like this big open case, and I took measurements, and I was like, I want it as big as possible. So I was really pushing the measurements stupidly. Now, let me also tell you something about Planet, the company Planet, 550 gallon aquarium with like glass bracing on the top. It weighs more than a vehicle. And so when you're trying to get something that weighs more than a vehicle to like slip into this spot, it was dumb of me. I cut it way too close. Because another thing, the cabinetry, there's like a facade, like a trim that goes around it. You can make it whatever size you want and just cover it up with the trim. But I cut it way too close. So on the delivery day, this was Dutch Aquariums Systems was this first one I did. The owner's son delivered it, okay? It's what I always do. This big tank shows up in the driveway. Hey, man, blah. And so just to double check, even though I did all the measurements, I'll go and I'll measure the case and then come back out and measure the tank. And I did that, and I was like, oh, shit. like fractions of an inch on either side. And when something's that heavy, you're not finagling that. It weighed, they weigh it on a truck scale before they get there, and I think this tank weighed like 800 pounds or 1,000 pounds. And you're not finessing that much weight. But so I was like, oh shit, like I screwed the pooch. And I went back inside to brainstorm. Well, the son had said something like, well, we could cut this trim off. But it blew my mind because like, look, I know you're the owner's son, but like you don't know aquariums. Like the trim holds it together. And so I went inside to brainstorm. I came out and that son of a bitch cut the trim off. It was ABS plastic and all this stuff. And he was sat there and like cut the trim off. And I was freaking out because then the owners start walking up the driveway, and I was like, and then I'm thinking too, I'm just a small business, and like, I'm gonna eat this tank and order another one, and like now I'm doing this for free, you know? And this was so dumb of me, but in the moment, like he told me, he's like, look, I'm the owner's son. Like if anything happens, now this sounds terrible. If anything happens with this, we got your back. Without signing anything on a piece of paper or anything. And he stuck his hand out, and I was like, okay. And it was like, you know, a long time ago in Texas, that would fly, like a handshake and a looking someone in the eye. But it's like nowadays, like, are you fucking crazy? But so you go 3 years down the road, no big deal, forgot about it. And yes, it did fit in after we cut the trim off. But then they call me, the groundskeeper called me, and it was, I've barely seen this in 30 years. It was a catastrophic failure where the pane, nothing cracked, nothing dripped. The pane in the corner catastrophically, it didn't let go because the trim held it in, not the trim, but the trim of the cabinetry, and it came out in a sheet, like a solid sheet. And the groundskeeper, badass dude, he ran and got a bunch of screwdrivers and a hammer, and he pressed the pane in and did these screwdrivers to bring it to a trickle instead of sheeting out. And I was like, oh, dude, thanks. Of course, it didn't freaking matter because this is why you get general liability insurance, because I'm in the dude's wife is a direct descendant of J.P. Morgan Chase. And this house is huge, and I have water sheeting out onto his floor. And he's an hour away from me. He held it in with the screwdrivers. He had all solid wood floors. There's no veneers in a house like that. It was all solid oak floor, buckled, all this. He made it's crazy. He called the insurance company and they did a damage assessment, and he had some certain high deductible even though he's wealthy. And it didn't quite meet the deductible, so he's like, well, fuck it, we'll do the cabinetry. And he was adding stuff to it, you know, to make the claim big enough. And it ended up $50,000. Now, again, I had general liability insurance for a while, but when this shit happens to you, you sort of forget what you had done or this and that, and you're just scared. Because I answered the door one day, and a guy put he hit me hard in the chest with this vanilla packet, and he said, you've been served. And he walks away, and it fell on the ground, and I was like, fuck. And I start reading it. It was like a jury thing, and I start reading it, and all I saw was like $50K, and I was like, that's it. I'm done, you know? But I wasn't thinking, because like, dude, you have general liability insurance. And so it is dumb, because I took a couple days, because I was in a daze, and then I called my insurance company after a couple days, and the lady was like, first off, if something like that happens, call me that second, not 2 days later. But she's like, stop freaking out. You have a $500 deductible. And she was like, certainly this will make your rates go up, but like, ignore the $50,000. That's something we're dealing with, not what you're dealing with. I was like, okay, I can handle $500. But man, for 2 days, I thought I was dead. And then it was really not a big deal after that. My insurance company's attorney called me. I talked to him for an hour. He wanted to know every freaking detail about what happened. And it was a weird deal because I had ordered it, but the guy cut it, but I said it was okay, but it's blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it was a muddy situation. And it was interesting what I found out when both of our insurance companies went to court, and it's a decision like if one of y'all want to fight this, then if someone loses, someone's paying for all of this. So this is like standard operating procedure that because the situation was so muddy, both of the attorneys were like 50-50, you 25, me 25. So that's how they handled it. But it did suck because my general liability insurance had been like $700 a year. Then it went up to like $1,500 a year the next year, $1,200 a year the next year, $1,000. This was a long time, but it took several years to get back. But I've never had a claim since then. But yeah, if you're doing this for a living, you don't have some sort of general liability insurance, you're opening yourself to a world of pain. Because what if I was on the hook for that $50,000?
Cutting the trim have something to do with why the tank failed?
It definitely would, because you look at trim and you look at a tank that big and see just ABS trim, you're like, what is that doing? But it does help on the flex, and just over time, it did. So trim definitely does.
Trim for where it fit in? What do you mean by
Oh, well, it's like a cabinetry casing. You put it in there, and it fit in awful tight. But then once you put the tank in, it's like a surround trim that you nail on that. That doesn't do anything for the tank. Yeah. Now, hindsight being 2020, I also sometimes thought, like, what if I would have taken some wedges and gone in and, like, supported that thing? It might never have happened. But insurance company split, blah, blah, blah. I still have the client. I've just been through some crap with them. Dosing tube, I'm going to go a little faster because I think the next speaker is coming up. But so there's a couple things I want to get to, though. I use all clear dosing lines. You know, in the past, I'd like, oh, that's cool. If I was dosing multiple things, I'd be like, I want alkalinity to be red and calcium to be blue. But I find running this all the time that I like clear ones because I need to see inside that tube to troubleshoot. Because AFR and other chemicals AFR will sometimes like scale inside that little tube, and eventually it'll clog. Also, invariably at the end of whatever tube you're dosing, of course you don't submerge it, you have it up out of the water, but it'll start making like, you know, stalactites, stalagmites, whatever, and even stop itself up. That's another reason I like the silicone, because when I get to a client, I can just pinch that, and you know, silicone moves real well like that, so I can just pinch that off. But there's a thing that I do that I don't give a shit whether I did or not, but I think I invented it, is distilled white vinegar. I run through the doser because I was like, man, am I going to replace this dosing line every time I'm there? Or what am I going to do? And it's like, well, distilled white vinegar in small amounts, if your tank is healthy, is coral food, you know. So, and you're not using that much in the scheme of things. But I'll have my jug of distilled white vinegar there. I'll take it out of the AFR. I'll get in there, and I'll run like 100 mils through and let it sit while I'm doing other stuff. You can see it bubbling out at the end of the tube. And then I may run another 100 mils again. And these are in like 500-gallon tanks, so this is like not a big issue. And then I'll take it and run fresh water through it and then put it back in the AFR. But this has been invaluable to me because these will get all scaled up. And if you have tubes that you can't see through, and like, it's hard for you to know, because I'll tell you, having clear tubes, you can tell sometimes it hadn't been dosing AFR since I was here last because it got clogged up. So I think it's important to be able to look through it. I knew I finally made it when I got a package from Champion Lighting Supply and I was part of the packaging material. I thought it was cool. Back pressure. Oh, so I recently had a thing where I had my equipment at home for my RODI. I had a lot of stuff from BRS because I used to love them back in the day. But, you know, since they sold out to the corporate masters, like I moved away from that. But, you know, on like how bulk resupply does it on that back flush valve thing, I had some issue going on with my RO unit, and then I was blaming the carbon pre-filters. I was thinking that I got a bad, you know, Dow membrane. I was thinking this. I was thinking, you know, I have it coming off of my line on the hose bib outside running in, and it was black line, and I'm in Texas, and RO membranes don't like hot water. So I slipped on a white rubber liner over that. I thought it was that. And because I had just put in this membrane and change all the stuff, and it was already showing TDS and all this stuff. It drove me nuts. Well, it turned out that the knob on that back pressure thing, it was pushed up because the screw was backing out. You know, when you open it and back flush it all the time, and it was pushed up, and the only thing I could surmise was that it had been running the whole time, even when I told the pressure to go down. It was still passing too much water through it. And then, so I've known about this product for a long time, but the Aquatic Life Smart, this thing, you seen that? I love this thing, and it takes place of the 4-port shut-off valve. It takes place of any back flush thing. It also, when it runs, it back flushes every hour on the hour. It back flushes and it does all that. And here's the kicker: if you get a pressure pump, that you don't have to run a pressure pump on an RO unit, but I assure you that when you do that, it works better. But those cost about $150. This thing costs about $150, and it does other stuff. And so I just think I love them. It's a good way to.
Sorry, I was not paying attention. What's that called?
Aquatic Life Smart Buddy. Oh. Aquatic Life Smart Buddy. I'll tell you too, it's funny, like Todd would probably be, don't tell him that. But like I get all my stuff wholesale through Todd, through Champion Lighting Supply, and I said, Todd, why don't you carry these? And he's like, there's no margin on it. And I was like, okay, that's a you thing. I'm just trying to find this thing. And so I found that the best place to get them is on Amazon. Really, it really is. You'll get it real fast, and it doesn't cost any more or less than any other place. And you're dealing with Amazon, but again, that's a love-hate relationship. Here's just a little thing. How many people use Inkbird temperature controllers? You do? So, like, you know how they give you suction cups? And for the longest time, I freaking hate suction cups in salt water. It's just stupid. Why does anyone do that? But the problem is, especially, man, when you do this for a living, you've got 30 or 40 clients out there, and all these tanks are doing all sorts of crap that you can't account for, and you're trying to but anyways, obviously those suction cups don't work, okay? And then you're trying to put in place, and they float around, and they get near the heater, they get up and touch the air, and so it doesn't have to be this, but I'm just saying you can use a piece of PVC, loop it in, and throw it in a place, and it'll stay stuck. There's another thing that happened for me. I had a situation where I had the temperature probe up top going into a tank discreetly, and it flopped out onto the floor, and it fried the tank because it was like, hey, it's cold in here. That's not that. Okay, hold on. I have to get to my. Oh, I'll do this real quick because not many people know about this. So I was installing a new chiller, which in Texas, it's I don't often have to use chillers, but that's a place that you might find yourself having to use chillers. Now, and depending where you put a chiller, it can be in a pretty corrosive environment. I have a buddy that's an HVAC dude, and he told me about this Viper coil coating where it's thermally conductive, and you can spray it on all this place. Now, I wouldn't do it to an old chiller because you're trapping in corroded stuff. But if you were on the rare occasion that you would ever get, that's what it looks like after you sprayed it. Because I was real worried, even though it says on the can this is what it's for, but it's this expensive piece of equipment I just got for a lady. If I ruined it, it was but I sprayed it on there now. That was a year ago, and it actually still looks exactly like that. And that's a chiller that sits in a shack attached to a house that's somewhat open to the elements, and it still looks like that a year from now. And and I got that from Amazon too. I even sprayed the copper coils on the side. Game over, man. What movie is that? Aliens 2. Good job.